Driven in by strong winds gusting at 80 to 100 kilometres an hour. We're talking about blizzards and drifting of that snow.
All of these
quite a high chance of seeing some disruption. Dry day coming up in Sydney, some warm sunshine here with temperatures up to 27, 28 in Melbourne. Not quite that hot in New Zealand. Mostly dry though, just a few isolated
on the
showers.
BBC News Channel. This is BBC News. Welcome to our viewers in the UK and around the world. I'm Yalda Hakim, live from Kabul. Our top stories. Afghanistan suffers its coldest winter in a decade. More than 120 people have died as a result of freezing temperatures. Thousands of lives and livelihoods are still at risk. Relief operations are hampered because women are prevented from working for aid agencies. The Taliban minister responsible for the disaster management says they don't need women to work.
Men are already working with us in the rescue efforts, and there is no need for women to work with us.
And we have a special report from the country about the ongoing restrictions that the women and girls of this country face. Hello and welcome to this special edition of BBC News Live here from the Afghan capital, Kabul. It's 6:30 in the evening here, and Afghans across the country are dealing with the coldest winter in a decade. In some places, the temperature is dropping to as low as minus 34 degrees. Here in the capital, it gets as cold as minus 21 in some evenings. There are now at least 120 people who have died as a result of the freezing weather, and we're told by the Taliban government that 77,000 livestock have also died. What's hampering the aid efforts now is the fact that women aid workers are unable to work alongside international aid agencies to deliver much needed aid after the Taliban issued an edict banning them. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has been to see one family to ask them how they're coping with the cold. And as I said, that was our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, with that report. And Lise has also been speaking to Afghanistan's acting Minister of Disaster Management, Mullah Mohammed Abbas Akhund, about that edict that the Taliban imposed, banning female aid workers from working with aid agencies. She asked him about the challenges that poses to families like the one that you've just seen there in Lisa's film. He remains adamant that women should not be working in aid agencies. Have a listen. That was Afghanistan's acting Minister of Disaster Management, Mullah Mohammed Abbas Akhund, speaking to Lise Doucette there. Let's go live back to London now and speak to Razia Sultanova, who is the author of Afghanistan Dispossessed, Women, Culture and the Taliban. Thank you very much, Razia, for joining us here on the programme. We can see the ongoing challenges that Afghan women and girls face. We saw the ban on girls going to school, then universities. Afghan women have been banned from going to parks and gyms. It really is a situation where they have been restricted from all aspects of life and really been pushed out of public life here. Yeah, they can't leave their homes without a male chaperone or a male guardian now. Life has increasingly become difficult for Afghan women and girls. Razia Sultanova, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you very much.
Well, as Razia was saying there, women continue to be restricted. Their rights have been upended since the Taliban came to power in 2021, in August of 2021. And as I've said, it's been almost 500 days since Afghan girls over the age of 12 have been prevented from going to school. And the Taliban continues to say until further notice, despite international pressure and despite attempts even within the Taliban Taliban movement to allow this ban to be lifted. Some of the leadership are digging their heels in and saying that they're not yet ready to lift that ban because the environment isn't the correct environment, that they want to create an environment where Sharia law is followed and practiced. But the Afghan girls that I've been speaking to say they remain defiant and they want to continue to learn. Many of them have been attending what's known as secret schools. They've been popping up all over the country and certainly here in the capital, Kabul. They're incredibly dangerous and risky to run, but it's a risk that these young girls and their teacher say they're willing to take. Have a look. Some of the students and a teacher at a secret school here in the Afghan capital. Well, joining me now is Marzia Babakar. She's a former Afghan judge and she now lives in exile in Manchester in the UK. Thank you very much, Marzia John, for joining us here on the programme. We're just running a story there about secret schools here in Afghanistan. In the 1990s, there were many secret schools here across the country, a way that women and girls could continue to get educated. Quite extraordinary that some 22, 23 years since the fall of the first Taliban government, they've now returned across this country. Marzia Babakar, a former Afghan judge, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Well, as we've been hearing, the impact on women not working in certain sectors has had a devastating effect, certainly for aid workers. The Taliban announced about a month ago that female aid workers could not work with aid agencies. The UN says that 28.3 million people across this country are in need of life-saving aid. Just to give you a sense of perspective, there's 38 million people in this country, and so more than 2/3 are in need of that life-saving aid, many of them girls and women in some of the most remote, hard-to-reach areas where conditions are freezing and extremely cold, where children are suffering from malnutrition, and that aid that needs to be delivered to them, that effort is being hampered because women are currently not part of those aid delivery operations. I asked women's rights activist Mahbouba Siraj about the impact of that. Just have a listen to what she had to say. That was Mahbouba Siraj speaking to me there a little earlier. Now, all day on BBC News on our website, we've been dealing with the stories of Afghan women. You can find that on our website on bbc.com/news. But we've got lots more coming up in the next edition of BBC News. Stay with us.
Hello there. I'm going to show you the visible satellite picture first of all.
Yet again,
from Europe.
another
You can
start
see
to the day with
extensive
dramatic
cloud
temperature
covering northern and
contrasts
central
across the
regions.
UK
It's
this
quite
Hello, this is Impact. I'm Yalda Hakim, live from Kabul, our top stories. Afghanistan suffers its coldest winter in a decade. More than 120 people have died as a result of freezing temperatures. Thousands of lives and livelihoods are still at risk.
We've been out just for minutes and our eyebrows are frozen and my face feels it's going to fall off. Imagine if you live day in, day out in conditions like this.
Relief operations are hampered because women are prevented from working for aid agencies. Taliban minister responsible for the disaster management says they can do without women.
Men are already working with us in the rescue efforts, and there is no need for women to work with us.
Also, we have a special report on the continuing crackdown on women's rights and the efforts to give girls an education despite the restrictions imposed by the Taliban government. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Impact. I'm Yalda Hakim, live from Kabul. It's 7:30 in the evening here in Afghanistan, and people here are dealing with the coldest winter in a decade. Temperatures have dropped to below minus 30 degrees in some places. Here in the capital, it gets as cold as minus 21 degrees on some evenings. Really freezing conditions. One of the ministries here in Afghanistan has said that children, about 40,000 children have been admitted to hospitals grappling with the cold, hypothermia, and also because of diseases. Their parents say they're struggling to keep their children warm. Devastating situation across this country. My colleague, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has been to see one family in the Salang Pass near the Hindu Kush Mountains to find out how they're coping. That was Lise Doucette with that special report from Salang in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Now, Lise has also been speaking to Afghanistan's acting Minister of Disaster Management, Mullah Mohammed Abbas Akhund, about the conditions in which people are living at the moment in these freezing cold winter, harsh winter here in Afghanistan. She particularly pressed him on the fact that female aid workers are unable to work with aid agencies to deliver much needed aid, life-saving aid, to quote the United Nations, to desperate Afghan families who need it, especially women and girls, women and children. But the Taliban issued an edict saying that female aid workers could not go out and deliver that aid. Have a listen to that interview. That's Afghanistan's acting Minister of Disaster Management, Mullah Mohammed Abbas Akhund, speaking there to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. The international community really does face a dilemma in this country. They're grappling with a humanitarian crisis, a humanitarian catastrophe that this nation is facing, certainly here during the winter months, which are harsh. And we have heard already that at least 120 people have died, many of those children. 77,000 livestock have also frozen. That is really the livelihood of so many people here. That number could be much higher, according to the acting Minister for Disaster Management. He says some of these places are so hard to reach, so remote, it's difficult to get the actual number of dead. But as I said, the conditions here are so incredibly cold. Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, led a high-level delegation here just in the last few days and really met with a number of Taliban leaders to try and push them on the fact that female aid workers needed to get back into the workforce, needed to be able to deliver that aid to these communities. And it's not just restrictions around women working with the aid agencies here in Afghanistan. Women are facing restrictions almost in every aspect of their lives. Since the Taliban swept to power a year and a half ago, girls over the age of 12 were told to stay at home and that there would be a ban on their education until further notice. Then about a month ago, young women going to universities were told that they could no longer return to their universities and complete their degrees, complete their courses until further notice. And of course, we've seen a ban on women going to public parks, to gyms, using public baths. A lot of women here in Afghanistan use those public baths that are obviously for women only, so that they can take showers, for example. So many restrictions. But on girls' education, it's almost 500 days since girls haven't been able to return to schools. And they have been defined. They are looking for alternative ways in which they can learn. Many of them have been attending secret schools. I went to one here in Kabul. Have a look. That was Mazia Babakarkhel, a former judge, speaking to me a little earlier. Well, earlier I also spoke to a women's rights activist, Mahbouba Siraj. She told me that women are bearing the brunt of the suffering in this country and urged the international community to begin engaging with the Taliban. Have a listen to what she had to say. That was women's rights activist Mahbooba Siraj speaking to me there a little earlier. Well, all day today we've been covering the stories of Afghan women on the BBC Live page. Go to the usual place, bbc.com/news. But from me and the Impact team here from Kabul, goodbye for now.
Hello there. I'm going to show you the visible satellite picture first of all from Europe, and you can see extensive cloud